So yeah, just thank you very much for having us here. I'm still waiting for Panos, he's coming shortly, hopefully. Just let me introduce myself. I'm Pavlos Antoniadis, I'm a pianist and researcher at the IRCAM and Labex Cream, the University of Strasbourg. And that's quite a new project for us, so it's the beginning of what's hopefully going to be a more long-term project. Yeah, so please, we beg for your feedback here in this very initial phase. Yeah, let me give you another 1 minute, probably, so that we start properly together. All right, here it goes.
We just check my audio.
Sure. Okay. So I introduced myself. Please feel free to introduce yourself.
My name is Panos Ghikas. I'm a senior lecturer at the Canterbury Christ University. And what else did you say about yourself?
I said that that's the beginning phase of a hopefully long-term project.
Oh, yes.
And we're begging for the feedback.
Absolutely.
Right, so what triggered this project is the idea of putting together two projects or methodologies or systems, or three of them, which were being developed separately, essentially. So it's right, and putting them together, plugging them together, if you like, see what happens there. We've named this project Open Cycles, Embodied Navigation of a Real-Time Improv, whereby Embodied Navigation refers to my project, and Real-Time Improv to Panos' project. And just to break it down, Open Cycles is a hopefully very intuitive, very fluid way of blurring the lines between composition, performance, improvisation. Those cycles are open because they're infinite, so we can always go back to different forms of music making, essentially. Always in a very collaborative and very interactive, I would say, way. Then Embodied Navigation refers to a conceptual framework I've developed referring to the embodied processing of complex notation and also to customized tools for that. And Real-Time Improv is an audio timeline navigation interface that Panos has developed. Maybe it's a good idea that you talk a bit about Real-Time Improv. I'll talk a bit about embodied navigation, really a tiny bit, just to give you the general framework of what we're doing independently, and then we'll show you how we're mixing things, and then we'll play.
Yes, so just quickly back to open cycles. It's open cycle, so when you're a cycle, actually you kind of infinitely go around. Open means that there's tangents, there's points where the cycle slightly shifts, so instead of a cycle, you get a slightly like a shifting spiral kind of form. So with regards to the real-time improv, essentially it's an improvisation tool, it's an interface that facilitates improvisation using audio. The basic of it is that it's a Max design sampler instrument that uses buffers. The special thing about it is the way it's designed to move and navigate through time in these buffers. So there's lots of ways we can move through time on fixed audio. If you've got a record, you can actually move the needle or move the record or choose where to go. So physically there's a graphic or a physical representation of space where you move around. There are other ways of doing things. For example, there are apps, and now there's an infinity of interfaces that use sampler instruments to move through time. The special thing about this is that it has two different ways of navigating through time. One is that the choice of which point the sound starts, the actual initiation of the envelope starts, is defined by a gesture which is velocity. So the harder I hit something, whether I've got an E-drum kit or pads or something else that can receive intensity, moves the start of the sample at different points. So I will, as a performer, adapt my gestures to decide at which point in time of the timeline I'm actually starting to work. And obviously that result affects the way I react, and so it's an interactive process, and I adapt my performance. So the instrument is not just this, it's me too. Together we make the instruments and we change. The second aspect of this is that what I described was what happens in one buffer, but actually what this sampler does is that it splits it in 8 buffers, which means that a gesture that I've sort of initiated through MIDI, through hitting something, will hit a timeline in one of the buffers, but I can actually, using another interface, switch across to another buffer. So what's happening is I've got different timelines, and I can choose at which point of these 8 timelines I can hit, and also at which of the buffers or which combinations. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting vertically through time and horizontally, and I've got these two, the horizontal and the vertical, in front of me. So these two things are giving me sound, and I listen to this and I react and I adapt, and I gradually sort of change the sound of this. So it's an improvisation interface, which eventually we're hoping to, and I'm hoping to actually push. It's an interface that results in audio. So these audio results are performances, but also they are audio compositions. They're fixed audio, fixed media. So essentially, my idea is how do I work with this, and how can I convert this into something which is actually notated composition? And this is where Pavlos' idea comes in.
Right, and what is a link or common ground is this idea of moving through time, which Panos applies to audio recordings. Essentially, I'm very, very interested in notation still, interestingly enough. And I'm very interested in how humans are really moving inside the score. So moving inside, again, some sort of unreal time set up by the composer. But what is here, I'll just switch to a different presentation so that I will be very brief here, but just to give you an idea of this model of embodied navigation, the basic assumption in my research is that human performers, as opposed to computational models, are processing notation via physical movement, via gestures. And this means that they are producing several embodied layers. So, for example, here it's a piece by Yannis Xenakis, a cloud, which is deconstructed in several gestural units, like here is only the pitch and space, which is then assigned fingers, when it's then assigned hand grasps, or the connecting movements are movements from hand grasp to hand grasp, and then two linear trajectories which change the score. And then, of course, that's a very basic level referring to texture and pitch, which can be very neatly combined with different parameters like rhythm here, for example. So how a very, very simple gestural image can be referring to multiple layerings of rhythmic information. I cannot go into much detail here, unfortunately. Well, that phase, we didn't need to see here. What is interesting is that this research was being developed as some sort of implicit pianist's knowledge, so some sort of annotation of scores based on my own performative experience, but now I am testing my assumptions through the use of multimodal data collected first at IRCAM during my residency there in 2014, and now also in the University of Strasbourg, where we built a studio for gesture capture. So we're collecting essentially many different sets of data next to audio, video, MIDI information. I'm also collecting gestural signals from modular objects, gyroscopes, inertial sensors, essentially accelerometers and gyroscopes, as well as mocap and touch keys, so capacitive sensing on the keys. It's really a big chunk of data to be analyzed and to be correlated to the score. We're using some of it already here, and we'll show you later. So as we will be describing the featured path in our presentation, the featured cycle, I will present more on how we are using those data, which probably brings us to our third slide here. So, our process, since we're in a conference on music as process, is generating multiple paths from an original input score, which Panos composed in a very traditional way, reflecting...
Traditionally composed and traditionally notated.
Right.
Which is on the piano.
Yeah, it's on the piano. I'm going to play the piece for you. It's a short piece. But then the idea is that out of this process, we get several outcomes which are crystallized, can be crystallized at every single instant as new works, essentially. But those outcomes can be not only scores, but also series of recordings of multimodal data. Those have already some sort of not application, I would say autonomous existence or aesthetic value, if you like. And then out of those data, we have the generation of improvisations. We're going to play for you some of it. And then eventually we have data-generated scores, including interactive scores, which is my field of study. So just to show you one featured cycle, the one we're going to present here, we have the original composition. It's a rather complex piece by Panos. What was very interesting in our collaboration is that I never worked alone. So part of the idea was that we record my whole learning trajectory through this piece. And we are using, actually, the data from this learning process for our further ramifications, elaborations of this initial material. But let me just play it for you so that you get an idea of what the original was. So that's the initial material, which, however, when we first met, was sounding far from that. So what we did is we went through a process of recordings and of my learning process first. So I'm referring right now to essentially this part of the cycle, the multimodal data of learning, using the patches I'm using for my usual research at Lyricam. Here is a list of materials we recorded. Each line responds to one recording, essentially. And just to play you a small example from that, let's play that one. So that's essentially sight reading with some sorts of prioritization processes based on my model of embodied navigation. So I'm here transforming the score, even though that's mental. Like I'm processing the notation, as I used to say, in embodied terms. Swearing in Greek at some point. Okay, I think so. That's the point where Panos is grabbing some of those recordings.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, I'm grabbing the audio mainly, because that's what I'm working with. So my process, the real-time improv process, is actually much more sort of mono, just audio, working with that rather than working with big data. So I'm actually taking just the audio file from up there, or a series of audio files, which is from the learning process, and I'm actually throwing them into the buffers as material for a transformation of the original piece into a new fixed audio piece derived from improvisation.
Right, derived, yeah, you mean that we're going to show what you are doing.
Yes,
it's derived from improvisation means that Panos is triggering with his system the audio files, but the material is derived from my learning process.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a particular take which we rather liked.
And I just quickly to say that basically there were quite a few performances. So that's me in a performance mode, not a composer mode, and actually Pavlos then was in the audience mode, which put me even more in the performance mode, and that made us even more sort of critical and judgmental on the recorders themselves, and thinking about which is the one, which performance is the one that we think could work as an entity, as a piece, as a fix of the work that we think that sounds like an interesting audio composition.
Yeah, it took us a while to come up with that.